Shalom, shalom, shalom. I pray that you're doing great today. Pray that you're doing great today. Pray that you will continue to endure and continue to get where you need to get to so you can fulfill whatever it is that you were put here to do. Nonetheless, it's been a minute since I've been in front of you all. Sometimes I take these extended breaks from, I guess, trying to provide wisdom, education, motivation, inspiration, etc., etc. So whenever I feel led to share a message, I try to be obedient to do so. I notice usually when I'm going through a lot of different things at many different times, and whenever I have multiple clients of mine who are going through similar things as well, that I like to speak on them because I believe it's very relevant, it's very pertinent, and it's very applicable because I practice what I preach. So one of the things that I've noticed a little bit more lately, or a pattern between me, myself, and I, but not just also with my clients and a lot of people that I'm blessed to work with, I'm fortunate to work with on a daily and weekly basis. There are a lot of people who are struggling with shame. Shame can be viewed from a spiritual perspective, also a clinical perspective, but also just strictly a mental slash emotional perspective as well. So I wanted to take some time to briefly maybe talk about shame a little bit. I like to always have something prepared and I like to provide a very specific definition on this. I don't know how much people know, so you always want to take the time to break things down the best way you can so many different people can receive the information. So shame can be considered an emotion that involves negative self-evaluation, so believing that something is wrong with you as a person. Shame also involves negatively judging yourself. There is a difference between like shame and guilt. A lot of us have felt guilt in our life, right? Remorse for something that we have done or something that we didn't do, right? So you can have guilt based off of, oh, I should have did this, or I shouldn't have done this, or I should have said this, or I shouldn't have said that. And then also there is embarrassment, where we just have these trivial social transgressions, like tripping and falling, stuttering over your words, maybe a typo here and there that you didn't notice. But those are more so temporary situations. When we talk about shame from a spiritual perspective can also be considered like a stronghold, right? It can be something that has caused other issues in your life to transpire just based off of it being unnoticed. Because one thing that I've learned is that shame can actually operate outside of our conscious awareness, meaning we can have blind spots to the shame. So there are many different causes of shame, right? So you can have scrutiny or ridicule if you can't sometimes fathom making a mistake, making a bad decision, failing at something. You can start to be overwhelmed with shame. So there are many different experiences that can cause shame. From a spiritual perspective, sin can sometimes cause shame. Abuse, neglect, abandonment can sometimes cause shame because you will at times blame yourself for things that have directly happened to you, even if you directly didn't do anything for it to generate that outcome, right? What are some signs that you're feeling shame? You can look down and avoid eye contact with people, so you're not as confident in your communicating with others, talking in a soft voice, being very timid, very shy, feeling like you want to move or leave a situation or a relationship or even physically, but you just can't seem to. Sometimes you can feel like you can't be your true self, where you always have to diminish who you are or shrink who you are as an individual, fearing that you're going to say the wrong thing or maybe look stupid. Sometimes, honestly, we care too much about the opinions of other people. Sometimes we want to make sure that we take it with a grain of salt, but there is sometimes truth to all criticism as well. So we want to maybe look at it from a different perspective and not be so quick to be offended and, become defensive when someone says something to us, especially when they have a good intent. And then even some of the evolutionary roots of shame, it sometimes could be a cultural thing, right? Sometimes our behavior can teach us about ourselves. So there is an aspect of healthy shame where shame can foster humility and teach people about boundaries. So sometimes you want to look at your emotions as a sign that something else is wrong, or is trying to bring awareness to something else in your life, like teaching you about yourself, teaching you about other people. But there are some consequences of shame when it goes unaddressed. So you can start building in anger, building in depression, building in anxiety. You can start to have toxic relationships. You can start to have issues within your interpersonal relationships, but even in your own relationship with yourself. But shame can also be something that you can overcome. So even if you take a moment to think about the things that you feel shame for, you have to learn how to change your self concept. So your self concept deals with your self esteem, your ideal self, and your self image. I've talked about that before, I believe, in one of my videos. You could probably look that up, self concept. But nonetheless, I wanted to briefly just provide some education about shame. Some ways to overcome shame is really, I'm going to always say, a relationship with the Most High, Yah, will help. But then also having a therapist, having a trusted person in your life that you can talk to, that you could be vulnerable and honest with, but also really just looking yourself in the mirror and starting to really reflect on your life, starting to reflect on your patterns, starting to reflect on your behaviors, starting to reflect on your thinking patterns, starting to reflect on your emotional state of being, or excuse me, on your emotional state of being and your emotional triggers. So those are ways to overcome shame, to identify shame, but also maybe to see, are you struggling with shame, because those are some of the signs and symptoms that I've, you know, previously mentioned. So hopefully this helps. I pray that if you're struggling with shame, that you will get to a point in your life where you will overcome it or start your healing journey, so that shame will no longer have you in shackles. Shalom.